Space, the final frontier. Well, okay, not really. All right, take two. Here in the Mitten State, welcome to Code 47, bringing you all things Star Trek, spanning the quadrants, the best thing since the neutral zone.
Hey, we are back on the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network with Code 47, episode 146. I am your Trek Lord of West Michigan, your humble servant, Charlie Carden, here as always with my number one Star Trek guy, Mr. Peter Stein. Peter, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Awesome. Hey, we've got another great show for you. We have Ellie Littlechild of TrekCulture joining us again in segment 2 to talk about some more Star Trek Voyager. But in the time in between, we've got a random episode for you. And it actually ended up choosing an episode that's fairly significant in its insignificance. But I don't want to spoil that. We will get to that shortly. And then we have one news story, even though Star Trek is very, very bereft of news these days. We did at least find something. But before I do that, I want to talk about these wonderful folks that support us over on the Secret Friends Unite Patreon. If you visit patreon.com/secretfriendsunite, you can get early shows like this show. This show generally drops on a Saturday or a Sunday when the rest of the world gets it on a Monday. So you get that a little bit early. Exclusive shows like our great Patreons. We've been doing awesome interviews in our Spotlight segment of creators from Star Trek, Star Wars, comics, and beyond. Ad-free shows, other kind of crazy discounts or I would say benefits and things of that nature. 7 days for free, and then as little as $2 a month to stay on board. A ton of entertainment for that $2. Folks like my buddy Derek Trevelyan, the figure dude, Francie, who does my wife's hair, Luke Lore, who is Mr. Xbox Expansion Pass, and my awesome Uncle Tim, are all Patreons, including also John Sedorf, the great Phoenix Sisters Entertainment, Kelly and Crayley, Brendan Myers, Corey and HD, Matthew Keel, Kurt Krug, a journalist buddy of mine who has fed me a lot of those great interviews. We love working with Kurt. And our friend Tanya Lee, who has been a contributor to this show. Just talked to her earlier this week, and she will be back with us later this spring for a guest shot. And the awesome Nias family of the Twin Cities, Sean, Stella, and Henry. You know, if you're listening to the show the day that it comes out, which is March 31 of 2025, if you hit us before midnight, you still have a chance to send an email to secretfriendsunite@gmail.com, or even send me a direct message. Remember, I'm at the C3 on most social medias, and enter for a chance to win a free 1-year pass to the Secret Friends Unite Patreon. secretfriendsunite@gmail.com. I'll even do another video before this comes out as a reminder, or just DM me wherever you can find me. After today, the 31st, the names go in a virtual hat, and then we choose them, and those 5 people will be announced in the next round of podcasts that come out next week, and you'll get our Patreon. We'll have 5 more names to add to this list every week, which we are very excited to do. So don't forget to get on board. Again, secretfriendsunite@gmail.com. The Patreon is patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. We would love to have you there. All right, Peter, we have some news, and we've talked a lot of merch news on this show over the years, and it's kind of a double-edged sword because it's kind of lazy. Like this show is focused on talking about content because we love episodes. We like to talk about what's going on. But there hasn't been anything. It's just killing me. The last thing we had was Section 31, and that is come and gone. Thank God. Thank the prophets for that, because we really didn't enjoy watching it, but we still don't have news about Strange New World Season 3, which is just driving me nuts. But in the meantime, we have a cool product. Peter, what do we have?
So we have from the Wand Company, who have made both the phaser and the communicator from the original series in actual metal, actual functioning technology. So like the communicator was a Bluetooth set.
Actual functioning, so I can shoot somebody with that phaser?
Well, I think it was a remote, so you could control your television. So something.
That harkens back to the 90s. I had my TNG phaser remote.
Yep, I've seen those.
And they're still out. I don't have mine anymore, but even if I did, it was from over 30 years ago. I'm sure it wouldn't work
with anything anymore.
But it was an almost near in size, and the coloring was a little off. It wasn't exactly accurate, but it was a fun project. prop.
it was definitely something that kids used as a prop for a while.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
but yeah, so the makers of those are releasing a basically functional tricorder. So if you've ever wanted a TOS tricorder that did not just have a static screen like the Diamond Select and other such,
Which I've got. We have the science one.
yeah, I have one of those. They're fun, great for photo shoots and things because they look really good. But if you want something that's like made out of metal and leather and actually like does things, I mean, I'm sure there's people on Etsy and stuff that actually make things like that too.
Right.
But this is now an officially licensed thing. They're releasing a $350 US TOS tricorder that does a lot of different things, has a lot of different things that move. You can control like everything from the three little dingle buttons that they're on the side. I think because what they did with the TOS tricorders, they added like multi-directional functionality, so you can push it, but then it also has like ticks so that you can move it up, down, left.
Oh,
right,
okay.
left.
Okay.
So they added more abilities to those buttons, so it's not just push here, push here, push here.
Yeah.
It does a lot more. But I did double check, the screen's not touch, so it is consistent with the technology on the show. But it has things where you can see like stuff about scans and all sorts of stuff, and the little discs, the computer discs in the lower part come out. Lots of moving parts. It's really cool. They do have a video about it. But again, it's one of those like niche collector sort of props because it's definitely outside of the price range of like people like me. It's like
right.
I will blow a chunk of change on some things, but
yeah.
And I love props probably more than a normal person should, but this is a lot.
I know. And particularly you mentioned it like photo shoots. You and I and a group of friends do 1 or 2 photo shoots a year. We have one that we're working on scheduling for the end of summer, which I'm very excited about because I got my first very high-end TNG 2-piece uniform. I got the first of it. The other 2 arrived this next week. So I saved a little money and got those. But when I do those, the props I have, I have a phaser prop and I have a tricorder prop, and they're both well, one is Playmates because that medical tricorder was pretty close, and I may between now and then reach out and get a second one that's not a medical one, so it looks a little more accurate.
I've got the Playmates Science tricorder, which I modified, so
it actually that's right. There we go. But and I have a couple of different phasers. I do have the Playmates one, which it'll do in a pinch, but it doesn't look great. So that's all well and good for people who like to do photo shoots and stuff. If you're a little bit more serious about it, which we are, and our group of friends kind of is. But yeah, something like this, it almost be like you put it under a glass case, and every once in a while, if you were having friends over, you'd show it off. But
you take it to a con and just go wander around the 501st and just
exactly.
So you can do fun things with it, but
right. Yeah. But much like with most, toys, it's not a toy, but it is a toy. It's, it serves no real practical purpose other than your own enjoyment, which is there's absolutely
nothing wrong with that.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Sound like Seinfeld. There's nothing wrong with that. All right. Well, cool. Well, I'm glad we had some kind of news to talk about because it's definitely been a while, but until we have Strange New World Season 3, Segment 1 is going to look like this. We have our random SODE episode. I call it SODE. There was, I don't know if you're all familiar with a comedian named Daniel Tosh, but he used to do this internet spoof where he played a clip. He would play clips from the internet and then rip on them for a couple minutes. And some guy said SODE, referring to the episode of a show. So Tosh comes back and says, "Don't say SODE, asshole." And it's just always stuck with me. So that's why that's the name of this segment. And pardon me for the language. So our random SODE is done by the role of a virtual die, as it were. Myself, Peter, other people who've hosted with us, other people on our Discords and our social media, and just friends in general. I'll reach out to them and I'll say, "Hey, give me a series or give me a number." And then we have the series numbered. I'll have somebody just give me a series. And then we have them roll for a season. I have a flow chart so I don't get the seasons mixed up. And then based on that, I have them roll for an episode. And Peter, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have the calendar in front of me, but I think this was your roll. If I'm not mistaken.
I did roll this one. Yeah.
And Peter rolled and got Season 3, Episode 24 of Star Trek: The Original Series, which just happens to be the final episode of the series, and we'll talk a little bit on how that was not planned that way. The episode is called Turnabout Intruder. I will read the summary, and then we'll jump in to talk about our thoughts. Dr. Janice Lester, a mad scientist, sounds like the beginning of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Yeah, I was going to say she could have worn the same outfit, but I think that would have been a little inappropriate for 1969. Tries to take control of the Enterprise by switching bodies with Captain Kirk, and as I mentioned, it is the series finale. All right, we'll give some thoughts.
In the sense that it's the last episode.
Exactly. So we'll give our thoughts, and then we'll circle back for some fun trivia. So Peter, take us through your thought process about Turnabout Intruder.
This is such a strange episode.
I know, even by TOS standards.
And TOS has TOS and early TNG have some doozies of just bizarre episodes. I mean, granted, every show has them, but statistically, the ratio,
right?
But this one's just very strange. It starts out and you have oh, well, we're stopping by this colony, which hilariously is mentioned later in TNG as kind of a nod of the past.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's one of the bits of trivia. They mentioned it in episode 80, which is, I think, Legacy early in season 4. Legacy. You hear it in Picard's log as the episode is beginning.
We decided to not go to Camdus 2.
And you know who I learned that from? Larry Nemechek, who Peter and I talked to earlier this week, and you'll hear him on our Patreon in our interview here in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
So anyway, random side thought, but so they go to this planet because there's a distress call. It's like everyone's dying. Then you show up and it's just Dr. Lester and
laying in what looks like the most uncomfortable bed I've ever seen.
Yeah,
it's
the way that you
see
her,
a futon.
Her neck is this. And
I'm like, no wonder she's dying. She probably needs to see a chiropractor. Oh my God, this is bad.
And so eventually it's it comes up that she's pretending to be ill.
Yeah.
McCoy, Dr. Coleman, and Spock go off and find everyone else dead.
Whoops.
Because of course they are. But in the meantime, Lester is completely fine and then turns on this ancient piece of technology, which allows her to.
It's like a super magnet. He goes, sticks
against the wall. Basically sticks him in a weird stasis field or something. And then how this device works isn't really explained. You don't have to.
The visual effect is full TOS technology because you get this kind of like the Foley of the time,
and then you see overlays of the characters just
go out, come towards the screen, and then go. If you're watching us on YouTube, just watch them kind of interpose and then push back again. It's wow, because famously the third season of TOS, the budget was slashed dramatically.
Oh yeah, and you can tell.
You can absolutely tell. And this was a great example of that. So now she's Kirk, and she's got to start acting like Kirk when because everybody else comes back.
The one thing I will give, I can't remember the actress's name.
Who played Janice Lester? I don't remember. In my notes, I end up start calling them KL, which is Kirk is Lester, and LK.
Sandra Smith.
Sandra Smith, yeah.
But I do have to really give props to Sandra Smith. She nailed the William Shatnerisms when she's supposed to be playing Kirk. It's legitimately hilarious.
Right.
There's a moment where she's trying to get where Kirk is I don't want to take this medicine, and is using Kirk charm on Christine Chapel.
She's
and,
I'll promise I'll be good.
She's even got the angle of the face and the the weird the goofy Kirk smile, and it's wow.
Hey, babe. Guys, I'll be back.
Hilariously, this is one of those things that really reminds me, at least on her side, because I don't see a lot of the mannerisms of Sandra Smith, so I don't know. I can't compare it as well, so I don't know how well Shatner is doing it. Although he is actually doing a really good job here.
Yeah,
but it feels a lot like if you've seen the Harry Potter films, where Helena Bonham Carter has to channel
right.
Emma Watson.
Yeah,
and which was done this feels like that. Obviously it's TOS. It's definitely a different thing because it's different with stakes and how they're filming and whatever.
Yeah.
But it feels like they did something like that because the mannerisms that she does with Kirk are absolutely spot on.
I
So as
know.
dumb
I
as this
know.
episode is, it's got some really, really good like character acting
Right.
from these two actors, which is
Right.
amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
it's definitely on the high side. The bonker side is, and again, I was watching, the roll of the opening credits after we get back, and they're going through Gene actually did the story on this, so he wrote this last
that
episode, which was not the
definitely
last. Yeah,
tracks
because
because
we do get some very there's the famous line which has been interpreted, misinterpreted, reinterpreted in the last 50 years, where Janice in her delirium, this is again in the cold open, says to Kirk, well, your world of starship captains doesn't admit women.
but
And
she's
a
not
lot,
delirious. She's just
yeah,
pretending to be
right.
delirious. So.
But and a lot of people tend to take that like, well, there were no Starfleet captains back then. Well, that been disproven time
Yeah.
and again, even
Enterprise
within,
happened like even
yeah,
if you like watch
e-
TOS, there's kind of
yeah.
some subtle implications.
Well,
So
there's a very, even into the films we have Madsen,
well, I'm
the
not
late
even talking about
Madsen,
the
yeah,
films. I'm saying the
yeah,
series. Like there's
right,
kind of some
nods
winks
and
and
winks.
nods.
But our very first female starship captain was actress Madge Sinclair, who
Saratoga.
went on to play Silva LaForge, who was Geordi LaForge's mother, another Starfleet captain.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. In Star Trek 4, there was the ship that first bumped into the probe. That was
Yep.
that was the big bad, quote unquote,
Yeah,
of that
and
film.
but it's like so there's that line that's definitely a little weird. And the fact that Kirk kind of agrees with it is also weird.
Right.
Um,
No, yeah, I guess. Yeah, which is,
but
it's,
I
yeah,
thought it was interesting his line about like, oh yeah, it's not fair. You're right, but then you tortured me about it.
right.
It was like, huh, like it's like there's an attempt for a nuanced take,
Yeah.
but the episode just kind of does like it's
Yeah.
similar in the sense to like Prophet and Lace, which we talked about a couple times ago, where it's like you see the intention and there's a kernel of a good idea here.
Yeah.
And like Prophet and Lace, I think, is less so than this. But
Yeah.
like this one does end up being leaning into tropes and sexism a bit more,
I
bit
mean,
much.
we get another kind of a kernel of a line, and what she says is not. It's true. It's sadly a lot of it is true. Where she, after she does the body swap, and Kirk is feeling loose. Kirk as Lester, so KL is kind of lulled back into the bed. He says, now you will know the indignity of being a woman. Well, being a woman is very difficult. I think everybody knows that. So that was, I wrote, it was a fine bit of wordsmanship by Gene, because I think he hit something really on the head. That's a big portion of this episode. But Janice Lester is also, it sounds like she was a nightmare of a partner for Kirk back in those days. She was not
she's not a good example.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
it's like she's one of those people that you probably don't want to have in command, and they do touch on that later on in the episode. It's like there's a reason that she wasn't in command, because she's like
right. She's
unstable.
She's a whack-a-madoo. Back on the ship, so she gets on the ship. She's trying to make sure that the body of Janice Lester is kind of marginalized and sedated. She's throwing up all kinds of red flags so that McCoy is not trusting her, because she throws McCoy out of sickbay. Spock is questioning his orders because he wants to change course and not stick with the rendezvous. Like he's not acting like himself, and his top two people are starting to pick up on it.
Yeah, his best friends are picking up on it,
right? And he's just,
I think it's one of those things that Lester did not take into account.
Right.
It's like, I can be a captain, but can you be the person? There's a difference.
There's not just this blind allegiance to the chair, though all of the red shirts in this show are like, you're nuts, the captain is my guy. I'm not going to equate red shirts to red hats. We don't need to go there. But it was very blind, where everybody else is questioning. They're saying, well, I know Kirk. And that great line, that great exchange by Scotty and Bones later in the episode, where Scotty goes through this, he says, I've seen Kirk terrified, I've seen him drunk, I've seen him hallucinating, but I've never seen him red-faced with rage. This is not Jim Kirk. Something is up. I am, and then, and even that kind of plays out in a way that gets us to the end of the episode. But yeah, I do love how they're in a big rush, but she goes up and orders them to go at warp 2. So I wrote,
just takes it.
he's like, yeah, I mean, because maybe that's normal, but I feel like if you have a destination, you're not going at the second slowest velocity in warp to get there.
Especially if
And
it's like urgent.
yeah, exactly. So, but they got he changes their course, and Spock is questioning that, but he's doing it in this very methodical, like, well, I'm not questioning you, I'm really questioning what your intentions are, and so on and so forth. We do get there's a random, I wrote random white chick instead of Uhura at com. And then we have a note about that later, but her name is just Lisa. That it's Lieutenant Lisa, not Lieutenant like Jane Lisa or something. So you assume that's her last name, but who knows? Maybe she's not human and her race is like the Bajorans, where they do the name backwards. I just thought Lieutenant
Maybe
Lisa
she just has one name, like
Cher.
Beyonce.
Yeah, Beyonce. There you go. That's what I wrote as well. But it was funny. So when Lester as Kirk as Lester wakes up and having that conversation with Christine, which you mentioned, he's like, oh, I thought the Enterprise was supposed to rendezvous with Potemkin and Beta Origai. And she doesn't question, she doesn't say, well, how the hell would you know about that? She says, well, we just need to get you well. I also noticed that she has auburn hair, which is, I think, Majel Barrett's normal hair color. I don't know that I don't know that this is the first time she had that, but it seems like in almost all the rest of her appearances.
Yeah, she has like a blonde
platinum blonde, kind of like Marilyn Monroe. Don't forget that for the entirety of the series, her name appeared at the end credits with everybody else except for Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. So she was as regular of a character as Sulu and Chekhov and Uhura and Scotty. By that metric, their names all appeared together. And even in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, it wasn't until Star Trek II that really we just got the 7, because she was number 8. And
yeah, she was in Motion Picture.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, she was a doctor on the ship. So Rand was number 9, but yeah, she was
only in season 1. So
yeah, and she was a transporter chief in on the TMP Enterprise,
and then she showed up in 3 and 6, I believe.
Right, and then in Voyager as her, because she was the first officer or comm officer on the Excelsior with Sulu.
Yep.
I do love how LK, so Lester Kirk, karate chops the Kirk Lester for no reason at all, and Bones is like, Jim, what are you doing? One last chance.
One of those weird moments.
Yeah. One last chance to see Kirk without a shirt on during for the series. When Bones
and the foot pedal thingy. Once again, I've never understood that, but there it was again.
It's cardio. It's for the heart rate. Yes. So I do find, you really start to see Lester Kirk unraveling when she's like, all right, well, we're going to have a court martial now. So everybody into the room. And there's only 3. There's 3 of us on the panel. It's me and Scotty and Bones, but Chekhov and Sulu are there. And at one point they're sitting on like in the jury box, but then at the next point they're sitting in the audience, and it's like 2 rows. There's 3 security guys, and then there's Lieutenant Beyonce. They're taking notes. And he doesn't have the right to conduct a court martial. It's why anybody goes along with it. Again, it's just kind of like, okay, shouldn't have they maybe been like, should we get in touch with Starfleet JAG, which was not really a thing at this time.
Technically, he can do a court martial, but it's one of those like,
it's super weird.
You have to like have good reason, and you have to have like, I think I'd have to ask my brother because he knows more about that stuff, but I believe as a commanding officer you can, but you need like people to back you up for it. You can't just like, oh, we're going to court martial you.
And nobody was backing him up. He was just kind of going rogue. He was like, nope, this is what I want to do. And the only people backing him up were the red shirts, Les Scotty and Lieutenant Lisa. So as we move forward, we do get on the bridge. Chekhov and Sulu are arguing after that last scene about what's going on. Nobody's sitting in the captain's chair, so nobody's in command. But then Lester Kirk shows up, and this was because Lester Kirk is flipping out, so like extreme aggravation will cause the switching process to kind of unravel a little bit. So we get the most famous, and I've used this meme a lot in our Discord and other things, where you get Shatner going like this. It's the famous Kirk boob meme, like, hey, he's doing breast exams. Sorry, that is a little off color. But the famous boob grab meme is what I wrote in my notes. When it comes back, Lester then goes to Dr. Dr.
Coleman.
Coleman. And I do love how earlier in the episode, McCoy's like, yeah, I looked him up. This guy is literally a complete moron. He's a bad doctor. He doesn't do his paperwork. And he sucks. And Lester Kirk's like, well,
He's only administratively incompetent.
Yeah,
He's a fine doctor.
He kind of goes, full like, well, maybe that's your opinion, man. Like, kind of goes full Lebowski on that deal. But anyway, there ends. Lester Kirk then takes Dr. Coleman with poison, and they're just going to kill everybody. But then when they let him out, Lester Kirk. Or Kirk Lester attacks Coleman, and then and then that's too much, and then they switcheroo back, and that kind of takes us to the end. Now, this just now Coleman not only is a shitty doctor, but he's also what they just call kind of a simp, because he's like, it's okay, I'd love to take care of her from now on or whatever. I'm like, shouldn't both of them totally go into that brig cell that was just vacated, because they're criminals? They tried to steal a Federation. They stole a captain's identity and tried to steal a starship, and then tried to kill several top members of the crew. So shouldn't they just be in the brig? Don't you kind of think?
Yeah, probably. I mean, as civilians, I guess you could put them under house arrest in their quarters, but then they probably should go to a starbase for probably going to New Zealand later. Exactly. Early New Zealand.
So one last note I have before we give our rating, and then I'll jump back and we'll do some trivia. I do love, now, all of TOS was rehabbed in 2006 for the 40th anniversary of the franchise. And we do have a beautiful shot, and I feel like this was inspired by the end of TNG with All Good Things, of the ship kind of flying off into the sunset. Did they do that in Enterprise as well?
It flies off into a nebula. But
so this is the same. Yeah, this is very similar. So, and that was obviously not part of the original show, because this was not a shot you would have seen in 1969. So it kind of flies off into the sunset. So, all right, well, let's rate. I'm going to go probably a 5 or a 6 out of 10. I can't really decide. Just because I feel like, and as I've been saying, I feel like social commentary wise, the message about the inequity between the sexes, more relevant these days. I won't say more. It's still very relevant today, but obviously vastly different back at the end of the 60s. Yeah. And this is, it's what Star Trek does best. It's bringing those social issues to the forefront in a space age format that makes it a little less in your face, and a little bit more thoughtful. But like you said, this was a weird one. The performances were kind of all over the place. Some of it was great, but some of it was too much. So I don't know. So, and because this is the unplanned last episode of the series, it ends up being like, well, that episode kind of sucked, but let's see what's on next week. And I'll get into that in our notes, talking about what was planned for after this. But it just feels like so much more of a whimper than a bang. So what about you?
Probably more like a 5. I know that I tend to be a little bit harder on Roddenberry's stories, because I don't like how he handles.
I agree.
I don't as much like how he handles the social commentary. He does it better in concept than he does in execution. So gotcha. This one for me lands better than, say, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield or Omega Glory, because he wasn't the one who wrote it.
Right.
So it doesn't have as much of the ham-fisted dialogue. It has a couple lines, but it's not as much. So like, even though like most of the concepts I would agree on, it's just like, I probably could have done that better. So that's generally what kind of bumps this one down for me, just because, I mean, I just don't like the episodes that Roddenberry has his hands on for some reason.
Yeah. Which could be heresy, but it's
I know
not, because
I mean, you can burn me in the plasma cooler. I don't care, but I just don't tend to like how he handles things.
Yeah.
But I can't give it much lower, because like the acting is actually really good in this one.
Yeah,
so
right.
The story isn't the best, and like how it all pans out isn't. It's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, right.
And then it being the series finale is just like,
it's like that's what you're gonna do.
That's not a finale. That's just kind of, at my house we kind of have this distinction between series finale and a series stop. So it's like, does it have a send off, or does it just kind of just stop? It doesn't even end. It just stops.
I was going to say, don't forget about the third option, which is the cliffhanger that goes nowhere because the show
Oh
gets
yeah,
canceled.
like
Yeah,
for instance, like the revival of V, like they had a
right,
cliffhanger and then it just went nowhere
right.
because it
Not
got
happening.
canceled. So
Yeah, it happens all the
there
time.
are
And
there
yeah,
are worse things than what happened to TOS,
yeah,
but it's just not great, and it's amazing that the show survived to have,
right.
both the animated series and then revived into the films and then the
And then
franchise that we know today.
everything
So
that
it's
happened from it. Yeah,
amazing that it happened with the especially like now how
yeah,
a lot of times however something ends is how everyone remembers it. So it's
right.
like the reason why no one talks about Game of Thrones anymore because the ending was so bad that you
Exactly.
can't look
Yeah,
at it. TOS
yeah,
wasn't that bad as it, at its end, so we can still look at the rest of it
right.
without being tainted by the horrific, well, not in this case, just the kind of mediocre ending that it had.
Yeah. Very, very true. All right, I'm going to blast through some trivia. So, Leonard Nimoy and Majel Barrett are the only actors to appear both in this episode and the first episode, the pilot. Nimoy was the only actor to appear in every episode of the series. Shatner appeared in every episode except The Cage because Jeff Hunter was Captain Pike in that
Mhm.
episode, and he also ironically died in an accident about a week before this aired. He fell off a ladder at his house. I remember
Ooh,
that's the story, which is it's terrible.
that's
I
rough.
mean, Jeffrey Jones or Jeff Hunter played, Jesus Christ, he was a serious actor.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's a detailed account of the filming of this episode in the 1975 book Star Trek Lives, not written by Larry Nemecek, but I bet he could quote you pages from it. Co-author Joan Winston had the opportunity to spend 6 days on set while filming this episode. Winston wrote that Shatner was very ill with the flu at the time and had considerable difficulty in picking up and carrying Sandra Smith, which I think he did. No, he does it when they're in the transport room because that's how they got her off
And
the planet.
from the device to the bed.
There we go. Gotcha. The actress who played Dr. Lester for Take After Take. At one point, he said, I love you, baby, but you got to lose about 6 inches off that ass. Oh my God. And that brought down the house. That's very 60s because she could say something like that in this day and age. They would tar and feather him, and
I mean,
rightfully
it probably
so.
depends on the relationship you've got. So.
But again, this is right. During the first 3 filming days, pre-production was underway for the 25th episode of the season, The Joy Machine, which I believe subsequently became a novel. I think that story is out there, or at least there's something with that name. I could be wrong. To be directed by William Shatner, can you believe it? So he had his hooks in.
Mhm.
However, as reported by Winston on the 4th day of filming, 6 January 1969. Gene Roddenberry came to the set and informed Shatner that the series was canceled by NBC and his directorial debut would not be produced. Despite suffering from the flu and saddened by the news, Shatner performed his scene perfectly, cited from These Are the Voyages TOS Season 3. And that is testament to the fact that Shatner, whatever it is you want to say about how he performs or who he is, like in his personal life on social media, is a goddamn professional. Oh my God. Peter, you and I have been doing this show for 5 years, and even the interview that we did the other night, you were like, man, I got a migraine, but we got to get this work done. It's called stage health, right?
Yep.
You got to suck it up because you got a job to do. And that sucks. So he was near deathly ill, and he just found out that he's going to be unemployed and lost out on what was clearly a dream to direct an episode of the show.
And strangely, it still came back to bite him later when he tried to do 5. Like that, like they for whatever reason, people don't. Production staff does not want to see Shatner direct. I
Right.
don't know what it is.
Oh my
I
gosh.
didn't know that he was supposed to direct the next episode.
Yeah, that is a new piece of information to me because again, I'm much more well versed thanks to I keep mentioning Larry Nemecek, but because of the books he wrote about TNG, I'm much more well versed. Last bit, even as filming was wrapping up, crew members were dismantling the Enterprise sets. Filming was completed on 9 January of '69. Production did go a day over schedule, resulting in a 7-day schedule. And then we also mentioned a bit about the TNG episode Legacy, where they drop a reference to Camus 2, which is the planet at the beginning of this episode. All right, I did manage to get 2. I didn't get any commentary when I went out to the Discords and various socials earlier this week, but I got 2. I watched the episode with April this morning, and she said, I love the choreography of Shatner dancing around. And Peter, you mentioned that as well. And then old friend of the show, Rick Reed, who's a local guy who I know, had a Facebook post this morning, and I wrote that you and I were watching this, and his reply to that was, oh man, Turnabout Intruder, woof.
Yep. The
Rick,
fandom
yeah,
has some very mixed feelings about this episode,
yeah.
generally negative.
And really negative. Oh my goodness. Well, that wraps it up. So we will be back in our next episode. I think we're actually taking a little divergence and doing something a little different next time around.
I think so.
But I'll keep you in suspense about that. But we're going to take a quick pause, but we're going to be back with the exceptional Ellie Littlechild from TrekCulture to talk about the third block of episodes from the 6th season of Star Trek Voyager. So we'll be right back.
Hey, Secret Friends Unite, let me tell you about Zencastr. We use them for our show, and now they're supporting us. Zencastr is now the all-in-one solution making podcasting easy. It's the ultimate web-based podcasting solution. Provides high-quality audio and video podcast production and hosting. With a full suite of professional tools, podcasters can seamlessly record, produce, and publish studio-quality content, all from one dashboard. Being a creator has never been easier. And we chose Zencastr because of the ease of use, high quality output, and it makes it super easy for our guests to come on. We had multiple solutions we tried before, and Zencastr has just been the best fit for us. Why Zencastr? It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencastr. Log in using your browser and start recording a high quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sounds and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. Have you ever worried what you sound like? Zencastr's post-production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes those ums and ahs in your recording. It removes those awkward pauses in conversation too. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with the click of a button. So if you're interested in making an easy, high-quality podcast just with the click of a browser button, go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code SFU1. You'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Now back to the show.
Hey, all right, we're back for part 2. Again, talking about Star Trek Voyager. Ellie is back. Very exciting from across the pond. We were just grousing about time zone changes and daylight savings time and things of that nature, which is all very fascinating. But we're here to talk about some Star Trek. So let's do that. Ellie, welcome back. It's great to see you.
Thank you very much for inviting me back.
Absolutely. Very good. All right. Well, let's kick things off. We've got the third of 4th portions of season 6 to talk about. So we'll just jump right on into it with episode 14, which is Memorial. Alan Craker doing the directing with a story from Brandon Braga and teleplay by Robin Bernheim, not a name I'm familiar with. This could be an outside source, which is cool. We get some great stories that way and some weird ones too. From February of 2000, Chakotay, Paris, Kim, and Neelix began to experience horrific flashbacks after an away mission. Ellie.
Mm-hmm. I think this is a really gripping concept for an episode. And it seems to take a darker tone than a lot of episodes that we've seen so far. I mean, obviously there are dark episodes in Voyager, but when you look at the chunk we looked at in the last section, this one's definitely a much darker one. I really like episodes that kind of explore the characters' vulnerabilities. So I think this one was a really good one for that. And in particular, I think Robert Duncan McNeil did a really good job in this episode. There's a scene where B'Elanna goes to try and help Paris, and she's trying to just make him feel better, and he's just yelling at her. And I think it's a really good performance from him and from her, because you kind of really feel like she's just trying to help, but she's making it worse, and he just can't get his head around it. And I think that was from both of them, a really good performance, because you really felt the frustration from both sides. So yeah, in terms of showcasing a particular cast member, crew member, I think it's a good episode for Paris. But I also like that it extends to the rest of the characters later on. Like it's a real surprise when Janeway suddenly has the memories as well, and it's not just those. And it kind of, I like the way that it unfolds.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a really interesting concept for an episode, and different to things that we'd seen before, rather than just reusing the same kind of concepts from other shows and just reworking them so that they suit Voyager instead.
Right. I mean, it's a definite, trope. They've even done it, in this show, because they did it with, Chakotay. I think it was the episode was Nemesis very early in season 4, where he's on this planet and they've tampered with his memory. So he feels like he's on the wrong side of this revolutionary conflict. So, of course, they throw him back into this one as well. But yeah, I also think just incredibly well done. And I think you hit it when you were talking about the Paris and Torres interaction with, the show's only ongoing, romantic relationship, fixated, romantic relationship that eventually they get married. That's very volatile. And you see B'Elanna pushed into a corner where normally she'd lash out because that's kind of her personality. But you see her, I think kind of take a step forward.
All those kind of safe relationships are put into question, though, because you've also got Neelix and Naomi. And that's another relationship that you feel like she feels very safe with Neelix. But this thing is so strong that even he is scaring her. And it just, the extent to which this thing affects them is just unlike, the Borg are terrifying, but this seemed to scare them even more.
Right. Because it's unexpected. Yeah. And coming from someone that you trust. Peter.
I mean, there's not a whole lot more to say, I guess. This episode reminded me, at least on like base concept, of a type of inner light, in the sense that it's meant to relive a specific period for a specific reason. Now, granted, inner light was a completely different set of circumstances for a completely different set of reasons. And honestly, I'm not sure what I think of this one. In terms of like, not like the concept of the story and like the acting. Like, I like all the execution, but like the end solution and the address and how they address the issue, I'm not 100% sure what I think of that. Because it's like, there's nothing wrong with having memorials. In fact, you should, for something that's absolutely horrific. But there does come a line. Should someone re-experience the horror? Granted, in this particular instance, there's theoretically no possibility of injuring everyone, although they came pretty damn close.
Right. Well, it's like remember O'Brien in DS9, I think it was Hard Time, where
where he's in prison for like years, but not really.
And and then it drives him nuts. And so the overall thought is, well, he's got the memories, and that was his punishment, and then we're just going to cut him loose. But it drives him nuts, and he almost
So it's just one of those, like, there's something to be said for making sure that because this is what this is addressing, things like genocides and things like that have happened here on Earth.
Right.
And so there's like a fine line of like, because like when I, for instance, went to the Holocaust Museum here in the United States, they had one of the cars from Auschwitz, and they made you walk through the damn thing.
Yeah, I remember. I've seen it.
And
too.
that was one of those like, there's a good thing there because it makes you face the horror so that it doesn't happen again. But that's not for everybody. Not everybody can handle it. And we see that with these characters. And so there just becomes a line of like, is forcing someone to live through something that they were not part of. And for like with the Voyager crew, they didn't even know happened. Like they're not even from the same place.
Right.
Is that something that's right? Like there's something to honor those who came before, but forcing people to live through horror if they're not part of the issue, is that a right thing? So the solution that they came is a solution. Make sure that it keeps running. But I kind of err a little bit more towards Chakotay on this one, with just like, I don't know that this is a good idea, guys.
No, I hadn't necessarily thought about it that way, but that's why in Star Trek these kind of moral quandaries overall can put all of us as the audience in the position of saying, well, I see this and I see that from different perspectives. So that, and I think it alone makes it definitely one of the highlights of the season, and certainly this pack of episodes. So awesome, gotcha. Well, cool. Any other thoughts before we move along? All right. Yeah. Well, guess what? It's not sweeps time, but it is time for a stunt episode. And episode 15 is Sunkatsi. Mike Vihar handling the director, a story by Gannon Kenny, not a name I'm familiar with, and teleplay by Robert Doherty, another one that I'm not familiar with, from Feb of 2007. And Tuvok are kidnapped while on shore leave, or on the way to shore leave. And Seven is forced to fight in a gladiatorial contest to the death. And I'll at least give the credits because we're kind of 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Meatloaf said it. We got J.G. Hertzler as a guest, the awesome Jeffrey Combs. I've met both of them. They're fabulous. But then we get on his way to fame, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Ellie.
Yeah. I would like to say I have thoughts on this episode, but the last time we spoke, I said that I tend to pay more attention to an episode if my favorite characters are the focus of the story.
Sure.
My favorite character is a grand total of 3 scenes in this entire episode, so my attention maybe wasn't so focused.
Yeah.
The thing is, so obviously I didn't watch these when they aired. Actually, I was born by the time this one aired, but
Oh
but
my
so
goodness.
like when I watch it, to me, like The Rock is a big name in Hollywood at this point. So when I watch it and The Rock's in one scene and I'm like, is that it? Is that it? Why is The Rock not doing more in this episode? I was expecting The Rock to be starring in this episode, and he's in one scene. He just raises his eyebrow in that way, and that's kind of the gimmick. That's it. I was waiting for more of The Rock.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but I guess at the time he wasn't necessarily known for being an actor in Hollywood, so that's the difference. Watching it,
Right.
watching it
This
from
was
the mindset of a 2025 viewer who wasn't so familiar. I mean, my brother had a punching bag thing that used to give The Rock's catchphrase when we were kids.
Oh.
It probably was around the same. It probably was around the same time as this. To be fair.
Oh my God, that's funny. Yeah, because as again, I'm not Peter, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know that anyone here is a fan of pro wrestling. Like the WWE, or it's probably I don't think it's just an American thing.
I've
Ellie,
watched,
tell me.
like 1 or 2 things here.
Do they have wrestling like that over in Europe?
I mean,
and the
wrestling
UK?
is a big thing. I mean, I work for TrekCulture, but the biggest channel we have as part of the What Culture family is What Culture Wrestling. It's huge.
Oh, okay.
So
Gotcha.
it definitely is, but you're right. That was another point I'd written, was that I'm really not very interested in boxing, wrestling, anything that really is the focus of this episode. So for me, it's not really one that gripped me.
I mean, it's a huge culture the same way Star Wars or Star Trek or comics are a huge culture. There are people who are nuts about wrestling. And again, it is just another form of dramatic presentation in its own way. But this was the UPN, the network that aired Voyager, paid for Voyager. Their biggest property was either WWE or WWF, whatever it is they called it then, and maybe call it now, because I know there was a name change at some point. And so sliding him in there was a super obvious opportunity to boost the ratings. Did it work? I don't have that number in front of me. Probably, because I remember very clearly at this point I was out of college at this point and still watching the show as a regular adult and tuning in. But back in the old days when it was broadcast TV, you saw commercials all the time, and this was promoted pretty heavily. So it was a big deal for that reason. Was it successful? I don't know. There's a famous photo that circulates of everybody standing around The Rock, and like Robbie McNeil is like giving The Rock a punch in the face and stuff. So it was kind of a promotional bonanza, but as an episode, again, love seeing Jeff Combs. Jeff Combs is awesome. Love seeing JG. I've met him personally, spent some time with him at cons and stuff back when Peter and I used to run a booth for the International Fan Club. He was a guest one year, and we've got this great picture of him and Bob O'Reilly. Great stuff and great performances, not their top shelf, because their top shelf stuff is obviously in the roles we know them for over on DS9. But yeah, The Rock just coming out and going wink, wink, or flipping his head. It's like, okay, yay. Otherwise, yeah, like the story is very thin and forgettable. I mean, there's not.
Why wasn't
anything.
he the person that Seven had to like really fight? And he was just, that would have been more interesting. Make him more of a focus of the story. Not that I necessarily would still have been that interested in it, but I was just expecting a bit more of him.
Would have been an improvement. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you're right. This was absolutely as he was within the first probably 5 years of his rise to fame, and well before he was in any of those Fast and Furious movies or the movies he's doing now, so on and so forth. So I'm sure someone who's more educated on wrestling could come in here and really fill us in. But as it stands as a Star Trek episode, Star Trek plus the wrestling was just an obvious kind of chocolate and peanut butter jam together synergy attempt. And I don't know if it worked out for him. Peter, please, I'm doing all the talking here.
Oh, I don't know that I have a whole lot to say on this episode. I think the only reason that he wasn't the final boss was that he needed to not be defeated.
Right.
Because that would have affected his, because
He
my
still does that now,
understanding of how pro wrestling works is there's this whole thing about how like the good guys can't be defeated until a certain point. Like there's like scripting and stuff that does all of this. Like there's a reason.
It's all real, man. What are you talking about?
Cena or whatever.
Real to me, damn it.
There's things going on, but I think that's why we didn't have The Rock at the end, because you couldn't have Seven like triumph over him, because then that would be like, oh, The Rock got beat by
a girl. Ooh.
A girl. Boo. Yeah, boo.
Like that would have happened. And
yeah, exactly.
So that's probably why they didn't do it. Yeah. As hilarious as it would have been.
It would have made the episode worth watching.
It would have made.
I would have enjoyed it way more.
Yeah, exactly.
Make it way funnier. But I guess that's not what they're going for.
Yeah,
probably a ratings or a contractual thing, because I think The Rock still has those sorts of contracts.
Well, he does. Yeah. If anytime you hear about him in a movie like with I think Black Adam, which was supposed to be his attempt to take over the DCEU, which failed miserably, he's like, well, if my character is ever in a fight, he always has to win. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's a very wrestling kind of thing. Peter, you hit the nail on the head. So yeah,
outside of that, I don't. It's an episode. It's okay. The only piece of trivia that I have from this episode is this was like the third Voyager episode I ever saw, and it was just on a TV set in Belfast for some reason. I was visiting someone, looked in the living room, was like, oh, look, Zinkatse.
It followed me. The Rock followed me.
I don't know how.
Oh my goodness.
So I finally watched Voyager myself later, but it was just one of those, like, I distinctly remember, like, just kind of kept looking over at the TV, like, why is this here?
Oh my
What
goodness.
is this weird episode?
Oh man, oh man. Oh, all right. Well, let's move along to what I think arguably is a much better episode. Episode 16 is Collective. Allison Liddy doing the directing. Not a name I've heard before, but I love to have new talent. Story by Andrew Shepard Price and Mark Gaberman. Teleplay by Michael Taylor. So, again, potentially cleaning up a spec script or an outside script from Feb of 2000, right before my birthday. Oh, the next episode aired on my birthday. Oh my goodness. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Chakotay, Kim, Paris, and Neelix, these guys need to stop going on away teams together, because bad shit is always happening.
They seem to not enjoy it, and yet they keep doing it.
Yeah, they're like, well, we drew straws, and yeah,
that was like a bit at the beginning of Memorial. It was like, I don't ever want to go on an away team with you guys ever again.
Oh, that's right, because they were on this 2-week away team where it was like the odd couple, and they were like, you left
and
your
the Sonic
edition the
shower
same.
broke. So
yeah, exactly. So everybody stinks, and nobody's cleaning up after themselves. But anyway, they're on an away team and get taken hostage when the Delta Flyer is kidnapped by Borg children. Sounds like a sitcom setup in a derelict cube. Oh my goodness. Derelict Borg children cube. Ellie, take it away.
Mm-hmm. So that's funny you mentioned the whole Chakotay, Tom, Harry, and Neelix combo, because that was the first thing I wrote. I was like, seriously, like 2 episodes ago, why would you send them all out together again? It's just why.
It's going to be bad.
I mean, I think, again, it's quite an interesting one. It's one of those ones where you can't help but feel sorry for these kids. They're Borg, but you can't help feel sorry for them, the fact that they've just been abandoned, they have no idea, and they're just doing what they think is right and what they've been programmed to do. Their costumes make me feel slightly uncomfortable.
Right.
Yeah. I understand that they're supposed to be like not fully formed Borg or whatever, but I just feel like they seem too undressed for me to feel comfortable watching it sometimes. I'm like,
yeah.
Could you have done something a little bit more? Could they not be more clothed, more Borgified? I don't know. Something about it just made me think. But one thing
if maybe they put something across like particular areas, it would have been better.
Yeah, I think there was just a lot of bare leg, a lot of kind of bare chest, and I just felt, I don't know how I felt about it. It just seemed a bit strange. I think the one aspect of this episode that I really feel like should have been explored more was the Borg baby that never got mentioned ever again. The rest of the kids
like they
stayed on that ship, and then that baby just was never seen again. Yeah, but what I really wanted to see with the baby. And I spoke about not the same concept, but I spoke about similar concepts in the last batch. But what I really would have liked to have seen was, I feel a missed opportunity was to explore the sacrifice that Janeway made in terms of motherhood and not having children. And we kind of saw that a little bit earlier on in the Q and the Grey, but again, not so much. And I feel like it would have been really interesting for her to have, for some reason or another, formed a bond with this baby. I don't know, maybe it didn't respond to anyone but her. I mean, you saw as soon as she picked it up, it stopped crying. And I just feel like you could see in that very brief moment in Kate Mulgrew's performance, just in the subtleties in the way she's looking at the baby in that very brief scene, that there's so much going on behind her eyes, and they're the moments I pick up on all the time throughout Voyager. It's one of the reasons she's my favorite character. It's the subtleties in those quieter moments, in those smaller scenes when she's not necessarily the focus of the scene. And I just feel like there are lots of missed opportunities throughout Voyager where you could have explored the sacrifices and the vulnerabilities, particularly of Janeway. And this was one of those opportunities that I feel like would have been really interesting. Obviously, I think the baby would eventually have... I'm assuming that what happened is that the baby was returned to her people. I assume.
Right. But
I
it's
think it's kind of implied that a bunch of them are at a later point.
It does.
Yeah,
I mean,
but the baby just was never mentioned. So I'm assuming that's what happened. But I kind of feel like when you have the episodes later on, we'll talk about them, but when Seven has that moment where she has to let go of the kids and she's bonded with them, I feel like that would have been an interesting thing to explore if Janeway had bonded with the baby and eventually she had to be returned to her people.
That would have been a great storyline. I agree. And again, when we get further on down the road, I mean, we know that Icheb, who is the oldest of the children that move forward into after this episode, we know that he survives for a while even after the end of the series, and we unfortunately see his death in Picard season 1. Sorry about the spoiler, it was from 5 years ago if you haven't seen it, sorry. And it's pretty gruesome, which is unfortunate, and a lot of people really didn't like it for that reason. But yeah, it's really bizarre that it's like they bother to make it part of the plot at all, that they have this baby and then it's like, we just put it in a bin, and they don't show it being returned either, because at the end of this episode they're like, well, we don't really know where these kids are from, so we got to do some research and it's going to take some time, but in the meanwhile, Seven, they're yours. They're the Partridge Family. Partridge Family is Star Trek. That could be the name of the episode, or Brady Bunch. I don't know, either one. But yeah, that was bizarre. And you're right, the varying levels of Borgification of the kids is really weird. Like Mazadi, I think it's Mazadi, is the tween-aged one. She still has some or all of her hair or something. She's not bald. Like everybody else is bald, right? Why does she have hair and the other ones don't? Maybe I may be misremembering. I'm not looking at an image of her right now, but I seem
three of them have hair.
Yeah,
to an extent.
Yeah,
and first and second, so each have and first don't.
Yeah, so. Okay. That's bizarre. So your hair only falls out when you hit a certain age? I don't know. It's a kind of Borg-Pattern baldness. Boom. There's the name of the episode. Got it. All right. I'm going to transition over to Peter while I make that change. Peter, go ahead, please.
I'm not entirely sure what more I can say about this episode. I feel
like I take all your points. I'm so sorry.
No, it's not.
It's okay. When you're not here, I blather a lot. So it's totally fine that people don't listen to me. So, yeah, it's an interesting first introduction to Icheb, who becomes an interesting character throughout the rest of the last season and a half. So, because he's, I believe, the only one who sticks around.
Right. Yeah, because they managed to get rid of the other ones.
Get rid of everybody else. Look,
I mean, not get rid of, but yeah, send them
home. But yeah, I do think that it's kind of interesting how Janeway kind of passes the baton to Seven. It does feel kind of like it was the writers going more like, this is a Borg thing and it needs to stay a Seven thing, which I get, but at the same time, I like your point of like, we could have developed some more interesting things with Janeway. But we kind of got a little bit of character stagnation for some of the main cast as time went on, just because they've decided they wanted to write more for other characters, I think. Pure speculation, but that's just how it seems.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah. Most definitely. But yeah, it is. I do like it when we do at least put markers in place for something that will continue to grow, and that's obviously the way to grow Seven's character, and we get some growth out of each ebb as he goes along as well. So the beginning is something new. But to return to something that is gonna then go away, we have Spirit Folk at episode number 17. David Livingston, a veteran, doing the directing. Brian Fuller, the man, wrote this. So you've got solid, writing staff talent handling this deal. From my birthday in the year 2000, Feb 23, I was
Nice.
24 years old that day. Problems arise running from the holographic Irish stereotypical, emphasis on the stereotype, village of Fairhaven. Running it nonstop when a malfunction leads the holographic characters to become self-aware. Ellie.
Do you know what? I actually find this one quite fun.
Okay, yes, I can see that.
I think, to be honest with you, of the two Fairhaven-focused episodes, I think this one is probably my favorite of the two. But more because there's more of a story here. I mean, when you have Fairhaven, it's kind of like, what's the story of this episode as such? Whereas at least this one's really, that there's a problem, we've got to solve the problem, and there's some fun things that happen along the way. Whereas I actually feel like Fairhaven was just a bit like, we're just going to stop for a week and we'll have some fun, and Janeway's going to develop a romantic relationship with a hologram, and that's pretty much the focus of this episode.
Right.
I mean, in this episode, I spoke a lot about it in the last section, but I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about the whole Janeway, Michael Sullivan relationship. I still think it was a bit weird. There's that whole scene where she's like, I have a boyfriend that malfunctions, and it just feels not very Janeway to me.
Yeah, it's very quippy.
It just feels she's so sensible and responsible, and this feels not responsible. It just seems very strange to me. But I do find it fun. I do think it's quite funny. I think it's better than the typical holograms become aware that they're holograms. They don't become aware that they're holograms. They start to realize that, Tom Paris is talking to the sky or whatever, but it still kind of fits within the kind of parameters of what they're programmed to believe in. So rather than them just going, hang on a second, they still think, they think it's spirit folk, as opposed to them being like, I don't exist, I'm a hologram. And I kind of preferred that than just a rehash of the same concept that we've seen countless times before.
Right. And then we do have the classic, and it tends to go back and forth. Safety protocols are off. Safety protocols are on. Now, they use a big musket to shoot the computer panel, and now things are working, but some things don't work. So it's all over the place. It's kind of an example, as I think you really made the point that, they're not really following even their own rules of the holodeck, which really everybody knows or should know at this point that nobody should use the holodeck. It's a death trap. It can kill you at any turn. We learned that back in 1988 with the Big Goodbye, which was the first lethal holodeck episode. Does nobody ever read up on these things? It's this is. This is the end of Fairhaven. We don't see it again, I don't think. I think I was doom scrolling through Memory Alpha, as I frequently do, and a page. I was reading the Voyager page, and they do make mention of the Lower Decks episode where where Voyager comes back, and I think Michael Sullivan at least gets a name drop. I can't remember if he appears in that. He is, okay. Yeah. Gotcha. But that's kind of the death rattle of all that. Peter, what are your thoughts?
I think I'm not 100% sure what I think of this episode. It's fine. It does take, if you remember back in Elementary, Dear Data, we had the moment where the holodeck was starting to shut down, and we had this apocalyptic freak out in London on the holodeck. Right. This basically takes that to its logical next step of if the characters could start to see the holes in start to see the man behind the curtain, as it were.
Right.
What would happen? And that is basically what gets explored here. So we're not focused on just the one character, we're focused on everybody. So it's kind of interesting where we deal a little bit with superstition and, mobs and that sort of thing. So it's a very real look at how people would react when their whole worldview is just chucked out the airlock.
Yeah, right.
So that's interesting, but it's still weird.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
I remember saying, like, when we were talking about Fairhaven in the last bunch, it was like, I don't know what you guys are doing, creating more people, making them sentient. This seems like a bad idea.
Yeah, right. Never works out.
Narrator, he was right.
Yeah, right. Morgan Freeman
so-
comes in. He did, in fact, see the error of his ways.
Yeah,
yes.
so it's just one of those, like, it's another one of those episodes where you're just like, guys, you keep playing around with creating artificial intelligence. You don't know what you're doing.
Oh my goodness.
So it's just another one where at the end it's like, okay, so now we're closing it down, I guess, forever, and so now these people don't exist anymore, but they were actually more aware than the last time we shut it down.
Yeah, you just can't figure out where to land.
So
and
it's kind of
yeah.
puts it for me with the whole like artificial intelligence part. It kind of ends at almost a worse spot than Fairhaven itself.
Yeah.
It's still a good episode. It's still got a lot of fun things, but just that
Yeah.
like, because a lot of times when Star Trek deals with like creating artificial intelligence, it doesn't like address like, well, what do we do with this in the end? It's just kind of like it's part of the story, and then there's me at the end going like, huh. So that's yeah.
Yeah.
I
Oh
do
my
like
goodness.
though that this is an episode. Like, I often think, I mean, just because this is just how my brain works. When you see characters on the holodeck, and they'll be like mid conversation with a holodeck character, and then all of a sudden they'll get a communication, and they'll just start talking to someone. And I always think to myself, why is that holodeck character not going, "Who are you talking to? You were just talking to
They
me a
just kinda
second
drift
ago."
off.
Like they're like mid
Right.
conversation, or they'll just start talking to the air, and I'm like, I know that they're holodeck programs, but you were just
should still
talking to them, and now
react,
why are they not going, "Who are
Yeah.
you talking to?"
How do they partition when they start? It's like if another character walked up and you started talking to them, would they not get? Yeah, you're right. The rule set is like, "Bleh."
Like, if you
All the
pause the
holodeck
program,
workers.
then I
Yeah.
get it. Pause program,
Right.
I'll talk to you now, and then I'll resume the program. But when they're just standing there watching them talk to midair,
Right.
why are they not
Exactly.
confused by that?
Yeah, every
Yeah,
once in a while the holodeck does react, not just in an episode, but like in TNG, I think they had it react like once or twice. So every once in a while it happens, but it's not consistent.
Right. Or with clothing, like, why are you wearing pajamas? If somebody has walked in their Starfleet uniform.
Yeah, or like when Patrick Stewart with a beard reacts to Patrick Stewart as Picard. When
Yeah.
he walks in on Data's Henry V practice, like, who are you? Like,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
Which is hilarious.
Right.
But that's one of those moments where there is a reaction.
The holodeck is just absolutely one of those. Rule number one is there are no rules, and rule number two
the
is
Calvin ball of Star Trek.
No outside food. So, all right. Well, let's roll it along. Episode 18 is Ashes to Ashes. Terry Wendell doing the directing. Story from Ron Wilkerson and teleplay by Robert Doherty. So there's a name coming back. For March of 2000, a deceased crew member surfaces. This is now our third deceased crew member making a comeback. And female, at least two of them were female. Because I was reading the Memory Alpha page about this. Claiming to have been resurrected by an alien race who have since adopted her. Aww. So yeah, now we get what's essentially Harry Kim's lifelong crush, who we've never heard of, being the focus of an episode. Ellie.
Yep, I literally wrote, poor Harry doesn't seem to have much luck when it comes to romance, does he?
Oh my god, he's worse than Geordi.
Is he worse than Geordi? Because Geordi comes off a little creepy. Harry doesn't.
Yeah, that is with the whole Leia Brahms thing. With Geordi, I agree.
Yeah.
Not
his fault necessarily.
I feel like this episode, I know that obviously, especially in the 2000s when they were making these seasons, they weren't thinking like this. But I just feel like how much better would this story have been if we'd actually already met this character of Lindsay Ballard, like in season 3 or something. And I just feel like the reactions from the crew, you kind of get it, but you're also a bit like, I don't believe it because I didn't see it. But if we as the audience had connected to this character and they had died and then they came back later, I feel like now that's a story they would do. They do. Yeah, totally. That's something that is done quite often. A character dies and then 3 seasons later they're like, surprise, I'm not dead.
Yeah, right. Very soap opera. Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like it would have felt more emotionally gripping to the audience if we had had that prior connection to the character like the characters do.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those episodes where it's like, I don't dislike it, I don't love it, but it's just one that I'll watch it and I go, yeah, that was a nice episode. I
Yeah.
love the scene where Janeway burns the pot roast, and then Lindsay
How
makes
do
the
you
joke
bur-
about it like repelling attack or
Right.
something.
How do you burn a replicated meal? Doesn't a replicated meal just come out? I guess if there's
Well,
no
if
That's
you
function.
if you
literally
switch a 7 and a
thread,
6 in
yeah.
some of the
It's
code, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like a common thread for Janeway that she's terrible at cooking, and even with the replicator. And if you read fan fiction, which I may or may not have done, it's literally a common thing in pretty much any story you read, that Janeway can't cook.
That's funny. That's
That's why she only
that
lives on coffee.
can't even cook when you
I
just
I
say
seem to have
make me a
adopted that
sandwich.
into one of my RPG characters unknowingly.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, I feel like, there's no doubt that this was completely unplanned. Where, in the streaming age, when you watch a 6 to 10 episode season of something, and at least one of them, or an entire episode or more than one episode, is going to be filled with flashbacks and like, here's a character, but then, oh my God, Lindsay Ballarder's back. And then you get, half of an act or a portion of an episode where you meet her for the first time, or maybe you learn through all the things that Harry Kim described, like, why do you think I changed my schedule so that I could be in your classes, or I would stay up all night doing this thing that, like, I'm in love with you, blah blah blah, and like you would have that just illustrated instead of, like you said, just being like, all right, we got the dartboard out with our 7 characters, we need a Harry Kim episode, and it turns into like a Mad Lib, like he falls in love with the dead girl and she comes back to life as an alien. It just really does seem like kind of filling in the bubbles. So yeah, you're right. I'm 100% with you, Ellie. Definitely it could have been something if it had been developed through 2 or 3 seasons worth, that you could have really had a lot more resonance instead of Harry doing more telling than showing, because there was no showing. And that was definitely to his detriment. So yeah, absolutely correct. Peter, any other thoughts?
Not really. It's one of those things, like, I agree that it's one of those characters that we probably should have seen before, because it definitely has more of an impact. Like, for instance, when like we had, like, even in this show, like, Seska was kind of a thing where, like, suddenly, oh no, she's terrible, and then she disappears, and then she comes back and she's like a Cardassian again, and oh
Right.
no.
But
Like,
but it was also developed over like 2 full
but it was
seasons.
developed
Yeah.
over time.
Yeah.
So that would have definitely helped, even if we just saw this character in, like 3 episodes in season 3 or whatever, I think is when
Yeah.
she's supposed to have died.
It was they
even-
gave a start date, and I did go look back
it's
at the
between
notes.
Hunters and Prey. It's somewhere in
Right,
there.
season 4. So yeah,
So it's
early
like-
season 4.
Yeah, so it's one of those things, like, if we had introduced her in the Hirogen episode, because in shows you like to, like, hey, by the way, here's a love interest that we never talked about. So if you brought her in and then, like, oh, by the way, Harry has a crush on her, and then he's getting ready to do something, and then she gets murdered by a Hirogen, that would be pretty tragic and help set up,
Totally.
like, the whole thing
I
with the
also
Hirogen.
feel like
But-
it's the concept of Voyager is where the issue lies, because if it was something
Yeah.
like The Next Generation, it's believable that she's on a different ship or they've been away from each other. But with Voyager, it's hard to believe that there's this crew member that was so
Yes.
important to all these characters that you never saw.
Like
There's
Joe
nowhere
Car-
for them to go.
Joe Carey. It's poor Joe Carey all over again.
Yeah. So yeah, if it had been TNG or basically any of the other shows, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Enterprise, maybe.
Yeah,
But,
right.
But any of the other shows, it could have worked. It's just difficult because it's
Right.
Voyager. It's like, oh, she's
Yeah.
Starfleet. She's human.
There's nowhere for her to go. She can't be down on deck 15 like the crew that we see a couple of episodes from now and be like, I've been down on deck 15 for the last 3 years, and
Yeah, no one
doing
ever saw me.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. So, all right. Episode 19 is Child's Play. Mike Vihar is back doing the directing. Story by Paul Brown and teleplay by Raph Green. Again, 2 names I'm not super familiar with. For March of 2000, the family of Icheb, one of the Borg children, the breakout star of the Borg Kid pack, I would go so far as to say, are found. But he is reluctant to rejoin them because they're bumpkins. No, I'm just saying that's a terrible way to describe it. They're country folk. They're certainly not like Seven. Seven is reluctant for him to leave, and his parents are concealing the real reason that they want him back. My goodness. It's a mystery. It's a big mystery. Ellie.
First of all, I feel like we need to just give a shout out to Mark Shepard, because I swear he's the king of sci-fi. He literally has appeared in
Battlestar.
every single sci-fi show that ever has existed. So
Right.
I'm waiting
All
for
the-
him to appear
yeah.
at some point.
Right. Oh man, him is Peter and I on our Patreon have been doing the Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica, and he's Baltar's lawyer, as you may or may not know. Such a great role. He just absolutely nails it in that deal. But anyway,
No, that's fine. He's in so many things. I've been rewatching the X-Files, and he popped up in an X-Files episode the other day, and he's in so much.
yeah.
Anyway, poor Icheb. I feel a little bit sorry for Icheb here. Well, not a little bit, quite a lot sorry for Icheb here. But I think it's a really interesting episode. It's very thought-provoking. Really makes you think about the lengths and sacrifices that people are willing to make and to go to in order to survive. And the questions that it raises over the morality of what Icheb's parents did. It's kind of, when you whittle it down, it kind of comes down to that old Star Trek saying, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. But what about when the few is your own child? When, that's the question that it raises, isn't it? It's, what are you willing to do for your own survival? What are you willing to do for your children's survival? And when the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, does that matter when the person that needs to be sacrificed is your flesh and blood? I think it raises some really deep questions. It's a very interesting one.
Well, yeah, definitely. And this revisits again the time-honored, and it comes back in Battlestar as well. That like, hey, the morality of let's poison the Borg because this will finish them off once and for all. And this kid it was genetically engineered by this group of people that otherwise just seem to be kind of simple. They're farmers, but they're also genetically engineered. It's kind of very Frankenstein-ish. But yeah, you're right. The thing that really makes Star Trek really great, obviously, as we all know, is that big morality question. Is it worth it if, or the ends justify the means? But this was it was a fairly significant piece of Seven's growth, I think, because you see her kind of reaching beyond, and she's connecting with all of those kids. Was it this episode or the last one where we get the famous "Fun Will Commence" meme, and she's ordering the kids around and they're on a schedule, and she has her punishment protocols when they screw something up? I think it was this one. I tend to get them messed up, but
I think it was the previous episode.
Yeah, where she's learning how to be, like the nun, the school teacher, rapping kids on the knuckles. For that, but yeah, I enjoyed seeing that kind of play and that kind of development with a character that we get a whole lot more out of, Icheb, that is, and obviously ends up sticking around. So Peter,
yeah, this is another do the ends justify the means sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And generally Star Trek falls on the side of the ends don't justify the means, generally, and that's kind of where it ends here in a way, right? Like, it's like they were gonna sacrifice Icheb and he did, and that he was unwilling, and so we can't do that. But like at the same time, but the thing about Star Trek is it gives fair balance to the other side. It's like, hey, they were in a spot, and like this is how they figured out how to do it. Should there have been a better way? Absolutely. Could there have been a better way? Who knows?
Yeah, right.
Not something that they spend a whole lot of time discussing. Like, it's only at the very end that we like figure out like this is how they modified the genome to create the pathogen to do this and that, and it's like, oh, it's ingenious, but it's barbaric. So that's like the only time that we get like a direct address of like what's going on, and then in the end it's just like, well, he has to make his own choice. And that's usually where Star Trek falls on it. So it's interesting that, but it's also a good point that it does bring up, like, because with these sorts of things, everyone struggles with this, right? Like I need to have something really good happen, but the only way that I can see this is something that's really terrible. And sometimes it's something that needs to happen, but generally, at least from my point of view, like, the only time where you can kind of do that is when you're directly involving yourself. You can't force someone else to make that sacrifice, which is what happens here.
Right.
So if it's like, Dad figured out how to make the pathogen, and so he injected himself, and then he gets assimilated and then kills off the cube. Okay, fine.
Yeah, he's made his own choice.
That's your own choice. But making his son do it without, allowing that to be a choice is where the issue lies.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, it's another one of those interesting looks at ends justify the means that Star Trek
Yeah.
likes to play with on a regular basis.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. One of the core that old chestnut kind of
Yes.
happening.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I
without a
tell you
doubt.
what it does. I hadn't really thought about it, but obviously with Voyager, they kind of didn't want things to connect. They wanted you to be able to watch any episode, and it makes sense
Yep.
without you seeing anything previously. But
Right.
what
Of
you
course.
kind of
Yeah.
realize in retrospect is that when you watch Collective and you realize this Borg cube or Borg sphere or whatever had been attacked and there's no drones left and there's just these kids left, and then you realize that's because they assimilated Icheb, and then it kind of
Right.
starts to fall into place and you're like, oh, clever. So even though their kind of
Mhm.
aim wasn't to do that, when you watch things in retrospect and watch them as often and frequently as we do, you start to
Right.
go, oh, that was
Right.
clever.
Yeah.
Because I bet people
Right.
didn't notice that at the time, but
Right. And they didn't have to,
like,
because
yeah.
you kind of got it. Like, okay, well, you didn't need to know where he came from, because you could just assume, well, he's somebody they picked up along the way, and he, and through walking it backwards, you could figure that out, but you wouldn't necessarily have had to see the episode. So yeah, totally good point. Absolutely. All right, let's wrap it up with the kind of the misfits of science here. Episode 20 is Good Shepherd. Windrich Colby coming back to direct, veteran guy. Diana Gitto does the writing and also the teleplay with Joe Minoski, so potentially an outside script that was touched up by a member of the staff. From March of 2003, crew members who are underperforming are taking on a mission by Janeway. Now, talk about the teacher and the bad kids on a mission. I thought this was super interesting. But Ellie, talk to me about it. What'd you think?
Mm-hmm. Well, as we know, Janeway is my favorite character, so this is a Janeway-focused episode, so of course it's one that I really like. But I
Yeah.
think it's a really good example of, or it gives really good examples of Janeway always looking out for her crew and always
Yeah.
being a strong leader. And obviously she needs her crew to be working at their best, but she's also willing to be the one to take them on that mission and be the mentor and personally help them, rather than just saying, well, they're not working up to standard, Chakotay sort it out, or someone else sort it out. She's
Yeah,
willing
right.
to take on that role and be the mentor and not just dish out the orders, but she really cares for the crew as a leader, but also I think personally she feels responsible for making sure that they're all okay and happy. But it also raises a really good point that I think, again, because of the nature of Voyager, we kind of tend to forget that a lot of members of the crew on Voyager might not have intended to be deep space explorers and to be on
Right.
long-term missions. And it's kind of a reminder of the consequences of Voyager being trapped in the Delta Quadrant. And I think that's another reason why Janeway's so desperate to help them, because she's always kind of feeling and battling that guilt that she feels for stranding them all there in the first place.
Right.
And so,
Right.
she's recognizing that these are the people that probably wouldn't have remained on board, and maybe were only on board because they were only supposed to be out for a certain amount of time and they had to do it and they needed to be there. And they're the ones that kind of fall by the wayside, and they're the ones that she probably feels the most guilt for, because
Right.
well,
Yeah.
some of them want to be there and want to be explorers. Some of them didn't want to be, and they're the ones that she's then reminded of the consequences of her decisions. So I think it was a really interesting one, and I just like seeing Mama Hen Janeway. So
Yeah. No, but yeah, big time. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, the shepherd, the sheepdog, getting the sheep back into the pasture. We did get. I'll give a quick note that we have kind of a famous cameo here. I much preferred it to the Rock's cameo, but it was Rage Against the Machine bassist Tom Morello is the bald guy in blue when Janeway goes down to deck 15 to grab. Was his name Mortimer or Mortson or something like that? The really snotty.
Mortimer.
Yeah,
Mortimer
really
Harry.
snotty, and boy, you could tell he's not Starfleet, even though he's Starfleet. He was just kind of, he made it sound like it was one of those, hey, I signed up to pay for dental school kind of guys. Because he was like, I did this so I could get into the blah, blah, blah academy on something prime, and then I got stuck here, and I'm all grumpy about it. And then you have the hypochondriac, which we get I swear to God, an ancestor of the same character in a very early episode of Enterprise. Remember the first away mission episode? He's the guy that gets beamed up, but there's like
Has
sticks
the
in his
rocks
hair.
and stuff in his
Yeah,
face.
exactly. So exact same character. And then the third girl, or the third crew member, the woman, is an actress, Zoe McClellan, who ended up showing up in a show I love called Jag, which was on CBS as a military drama that I enjoyed. But she's just also one of those, she's just a character actor who's been in a gazillion things in the last 25 years. So, but yeah, I enjoyed it. And yeah, these are three like very non-Starfleet people, because you're used to seeing like, you see Geordi or Data or, you know, Chakotay, or people who are like super Starfleet and capable and they know everything and a lot of confidence. And then you get these three like, you know, kids sitting in the, you know, the bad kid sitting in the back of the bus, or the, you know, the kid who you just don't see. They hunch their shoulders down in class and don't see him sitting there. So it was a cool concept. And it was not the first time they did it, because they kind of tried it with, you know, the roughest of the Maquis that Tuvok had to like do PE for them. They were running around the ship and stuff. That was since back in season 1. So this is kind of the flip side of it. If those were like the most obnoxious of the Maquis, these are kind of like the most obnoxious of the Starfleet people. And you wanted to step in and again make sure everybody feels like they're contributing. And
I would say as well, compared to what we were saying about Lindsay Ballard and being like, now you just introduced another character and we're supposed to believe that they, you know, there was a strong connection. But I think the difference with this is that these characters are supposed to be the ones that just merge into the background and you don't really notice. And they may well have been in an episode and you might not have noticed them.
It's not the back of their head. Yeah, it was them.
Yeah. Whereas Lindsay Ballard, we were led to believe that she was really close to Harry Kim and other members of the kind of senior staff. And that's where you kind of lost the believability. Whereas these characters, you could believe that you've never seen this one because he just hides away down on deck 15, or you never see these ones because they don't want to go on away missions, or they're not actually that good at what they do. So I think in this case it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say this was, without a doubt, the most convincing. All right, well, that is our episodes. Let's blast through and pick a favorite and a least favorite, and then we'll call it a day. Ellie, let's have it.
Okay, my least favorite, I would say, is Sunkatsi. It's just
softball.
It's just not for me. It just didn't really appeal. When I came to watch these episodes, most of them I could remember mostly. Whereas that one I was like, I remember The Rock was in it, but I'm going to have to rewatch that one to actually make some points about it.
And that was all you were supposed to remember, and that's why you were supposed to watch it back in 2000 if you were a viewer at that time.
Favorite, I think Good Shepherd is my favorite of this batch.
Yeah.
One. Like I said, it's a Janeway focused story, so automatically that means it's one I'm going to enjoy. But I think it explores some really interesting levels to her being a mentor to these different characters, and I just like that one.
I'll jump in and say you nailed mine too. I feel the exact same way. Sunkatsi, super forgettable. It was a stunt. I don't love stunts. And then I like seeing, you know, kind of the flip side of the pancake of characters on the show that, you know, on the ship that are there because they didn't really have a choice. You know, where it's even less so than the Maquis, who were at least spacefaring and they were on a mission. These are three people who are like, you know, I was taking a ride from here to there, and then I was a week from retirement, or I was going to get out or whatever. So people who are kind of stuck in the situation while everybody's stuck, they're more stuck because they don't enjoy any of this, or they suck at it, like you said. And exactly. So that's me. All right, Peter.
I'm pretty much going to have to agree with both of you.
Wow, sweet.
I was leaning towards maybe saying Memorial was my favorite just because it just deals with a big issue, and I like to complain about how people make decisions sometimes, but
the
Shepherd's a good episode.
Yeah, very true. Good stuff. Awesome. Well, that takes us out of the show. Ellie, thank you for being here. A twofer, and would love to have you back at any point in the future. Should you so choose, we'd love to have you along. Tell us again where people find you out there.
Yeah, so you can find me kind of professionally on TrekCulture, which you can find on YouTube, and then we're across all the social media pages as well. And then you can find me personally on all the social media pages. My username changes slightly across different ones, but Ellie Littlechild it's pretty unique, so I'm pretty sure you'll find me.
Awesome. And we're big fans of Trek Culture here, so I do actually have it linked in the show notes on an ongoing basis. And I'm sure Ellie will share this episode when it comes out as well. So a little synergy happening. Peter, what about you?
You can find me around the interwebs at Petrus Aquinas on most things. I am not terribly active. You can find me.
He's there, I swear.
That's about it. I'm a little bit more active on Discord. You can also find me over on ELH's Twitch and YouTube channel, where I'm playing a Temerian engineer. And then you can find me behind the scenes on Starship Excelsior.
Awesome. And you can find me across all of the socials at the same handle, at the C3, TheCeeThree. Excuse me. But also very active on our Secret Friends Unite Discord, where we're having fun chats about all things related to geek, and the United Trekkers of Michigan, just a Trek Discord. We had to call it something so you don't have to be in Michigan to join. But find us. And of course, secretfriendsunite@gmail.com. Drop us a line. Let us know what you're thinking about Trek. Let us know if you agree what we had to say about these episodes. But till next time,
Or if you really like Tsunkatse.
Really like Shunkatsu. If you're all about The Rock and think everything he does is just golden, if you loved Black Adam, please just let us know. And you know what? Everybody's entitled to their opinion and respect it in some way, shape, or form sometimes. But at any rate, as always, I'm going to tell you, thank you for joining us. Sharing is caring, and to keep on trekking.
Peace and long life.
Nanu, nanu.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.